you can build a relationship with someone where you start to treat them as the ends in and of themselves. They're no longer a means to some separate ends of you getting something from them, whether it's validation or ego gratification or sex or affection or intimacy or even love. It's a genuine desire to connect with another person and really put yourself into their experience and feel what it feels like to be them, to truly be in an empathetic space with them, and to truly have their best interests at heart. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of ShiShi Meditations. And in this video, I want to talk about a concept that I have been throwing around in my head a little bit. And it's all about what motivates us, or using myself as the guinea pig in this video to explore this concept. What motivates me to take the actions that I take, to think the thoughts that I think, to say the things that I do, say the things that I say, to do the things that I do. What are the intrinsic, both subconscious and conscious motivators behind my actions? And what got me thinking about this was, the fact that sometimes it seems like there might be a moment where there's one thing that I really want, and then, maybe a day or 2 days later that there's something else that I really want. And those things can sometimes almost seem to be conflicting. And, that's been happening to me quite a bit in terms of my desires, specifically in my dating life, in relationships, and in my romantic life with women. Is just kind of like one day feeling like this is that I want this, and then another day feeling like that I want this, and not knowing which one is necessarily correct or best serving for me or for the person that I'm interacting with. And that really got me thinking about, is there a way to like bucket these motivations so that I can start to get a bit more of a coherent understanding around what motivates my behaviors in this area of my life. And I got to thinking about it a bit, and I basically whittled it down to, and I've thought about this a lot because I whittled it down to 3 categories, and then I was like trying to catch myself if I was like just being too reductionist by only getting it down to 3 categories. But after giving it quite a bit of thought and meditation, I think pretty much all of my motivations around my dating life essentially fall into 3 buckets. And I'm curious to see if you guys, both girls and guys, agree with this, or can find or can relate to this. So for me, the 3 buckets are ego-based, experience-based, and fulfillment-based. Now, the first bucket, ego-based, is all about how good the thing that I'm doing or the experience that I'm trying to get is going to feel for me, for my ego, for my sense of self, for my sense of identity. And it's essentially in that way pretty much totally self-serving. It's really using the other person as a means to the end of satisfying my own ego. So, an example of this that doesn't necessarily apply to my life but just kind of like a common example in pop culture would be, somebody wanting to date a very attractive partner, not because they're intrinsically interested in that person, and not necessarily even because they find the person attractive, but the main motivator for that being that they want to date someone attractive so that they can show them off to their friends, so that when they go to a dinner party or whatever, they have that piece of eye candy on their arm, male or female. So that's kind of the example of taking an approach to your dating life that is essentially very ego-driven and very ego-based. And the next category is experience-driven. And so using that same analogy or that same example, if you were experience-driven and you wanted to date somebody attractive of the opposite sex, the motivation for wanting to have to date that person would less be about the fact that you could show them off. It would be about the actual pure physical, aesthetic, sensational experience of actually getting to date and have sex with someone that you find attractive, and getting to, be around that person, and just the actual experience of what that would be like. And this one's not really complicated. There's no like psychology necessarily involved in this, or any sort of like reasoning that you really need to think deeply about. It's purely just that would be a pleasurable experience, in the same way that like you don't really think too much about the fact that you want to eat your favorite food. It doesn't necessarily satisfy your ego, or if anything, it probably doesn't if it's not healthy. It's really just you want to have that experience. You're just alive on this earth, and you want to have pleasurable experiences. And dating and having a romantic relationship with somebody of the opposite sex is inherently just in and of itself a pleasurable experience. So that's number two. And I think that one, when it's really done from that frame of view, it is still inherently, self-serving, because it is still about you and having the experience. But it can also be the same for the other person. The other person can also have that same motivation of, I just want to have this experience. And so in that way, you're kind of both using each other just to satisfy your desire for that experience. And the third bucket that I've really been noticing, specifically in myself, popping up a lot more, is the desire for a deeper level connection. I think when I first introduced this concept, I said fulfillment, but a better word is probably connection. A deeper level connection with a human being, where you can build a relationship with someone where you start to treat them as the ends in and of themselves. They're no longer a means to some separate ends of you getting something from them, whether it's validation or ego gratification, or sex, or affection, or intimacy, or even love. It's a genuine desire to connect with another person and really put yourself into their experience and feel what it feels like to be them, to truly be in an empathetic space with them, and to truly have their best interests at heart. And I heard this described the other way as to try to capitalize on their best interests, which I think is a really cool way of thinking about it. And so I've been thinking about this a lot, and essentially these three buckets basically define or all of my motivations for getting into different relationships and my whole dating life, since I've been dating, have fallen into one of these three buckets. I can look at all of my actions and reverse engineer and realize, the motivation was ego based here, it was experience based here, it was connection or fulfillment based here. And what I've noticed is, I'm 29 now, and when I was younger, when I was a young man, when I was like, late teens and early 20s, much of my approach towards my dating life was honestly very much ego based. There was a lot of overcompensating for love and affection that I feel like maybe I didn't receive. Not that I grew up with very loving parents and everything like that, but just from women, honestly. And there was a lot of sexual conquest involved when I was younger. And so that experience was me just trying to go out and prove to myself that I was worthy of love and sex and affection and all that stuff. And that really lasted, to be honest, into my early 20s. And, once I kind of scratched that, once I scratched that itch of my ego, so to speak, my motivation started to shift more into experience space. And it was all about, I want to just enjoy, for the sake of the aesthetic experience, I just want to enjoy the pleasure of dating women, the intimacy, the sexual satisfaction, whatever it might be. That was my motivation primarily, was just to enjoy that experience. And, that was around my mid 20s. And, now I'm in my late 20s, about to be in my 30s. And I've noticed that while those first two elements are still there, I would say more so the experience, but the ego element is very minimal at this point. I just feel like I'm because I've done a lot of like introspection and meditation practice and self-awareness work. I feel like I'm able to very quickly diagnose if I'm taking a certain action, if it's influenced by the desire to boost my ego, not just in dating, but really in life in general. Not to say that I still don't fall prey to that, but I'm a lot more aware of it. So doesn't play as big of a role at a subconscious level. But I do feel like my main motivation now is connection, is fulfillment, is to really be able to open my heart up enough so that I can actually let somebody else into it and feel what they're feeling instead of just kind of, you know, keeping myself in reserve emotionally and just experiencing things at a more surface level. And that's been a very interesting experience for me because on the one hand, at a heart level, I feel very called to do that. And it feels like the right thing to do. And I feel like eventually when I do find the person that I will settle down with, not that I really want to do that anytime soon, I know that that's going to be what the relationship is primarily going to be built upon. But what's also been interesting is there is still a part of me that craves and wants experience, just for its own sake, just literally to be able to have the memory of, wow, like remember when that happened, that was like so awesome, or like that relationship, even though it wasn't necessarily super emotional, it was like really hot and like we were really into each other or whatever. And just to be able to have those experiences in the same way that you want to travel places and you want to taste delicious foods. And what I've started to realize is I actually feel like those first two buckets are essentially kind of the same. Like your desire for experiences, yes, on the one hand, is not complicated because it's just a desire to experience aesthetic pleasures in life, and to experience sensation. But on the other hand, the desire to have a memory bank full of amazing experiences is essentially an ego-serving desire. It's the desire to be able to look back at your life and say, wow, I really lived my life. And the moment you start to use that kind of language, you're bolstering yourself up and you're creating separation inherently, whether you're conscious of it or not, from yourself and somebody who didn't live that life, right? So that's what the ego thrives on, is separation. And so I just wanted to share this video because this is something I've been going through quite a bit. And to be honest, it's been a little bit confusing in terms of like not knowing exactly what I want out of my dating life. And this applies to all areas of life, but I just happen to be going through this in a romantic context right now, personally. And I think the ultimate goal is to be able to integrate all three of these in a healthy way, and to be able to realize that you don't need to completely shun your ego, or you don't need to completely shun your desire for experience to like have some amazing fulfilled relationship and just be like a vessel for someone else's happiness, because that is in its own way paradoxically another perverse manifestation of the ego. Now your ego is just built around you being egoless. So I think for me, the process now is becoming to be able to recognize that there are parts of me that want to feel loved and are just selfishly like out for my own ego. And there are parts of me that just want to crave sensation and new experience, and lustful parts of me that, aren't necessarily super deep emotionally, but just want to have romantic and intimate and sexual experiences. And then there's also a part of me that seems to be growing more as I get older and mature more emotionally, that wants to open my heart more and be more vulnerable with a partner or multiple partners, and really be able to let people into my heart and feel with them and really almost get out of my own, lose track of my own sort of desires and be able to put myself in their heart and try to capitalize on their best interests. Because I do think that ultimately human beings are inherently social creatures and we crave that connection, and that's the deepest form of that connection. And to then just realize that all three of those buckets, or two of those, if we want to loop ego and experience into one and fulfillment and connection as the other, deserve love and deserve attention. And none of them are to be shunned. It's more about integrating them into this delicious blend of oneness where you can honor all of those parts of yourself and hopefully build a healthy relationship between them, so that when you feel lust, you can act on it without feeling ashamed that you're lustful in that moment. And when you feel love, you can act on it without feeling afraid to open yourself up and be vulnerable, and you don't need to compartmentalize them so much. And I feel like in my life personally, I've done that. I've always compartmentalized. Not always, but definitely in the past, 5 or 6 years, as I've been heavily in this experience phase. And so I'm very excited to just open my heart up and see if I can integrate all these parts together. So I just wanted to share that with you guys because it's been on my mind and in my heart. And yeah, I would love to hear what you think about this sort of concept that I've concocted. And as always, I love you guys. And until next time, peace out.